Hello everybody, my name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today you and I are going to be talking about how to make beats, and I'm going to explain the process like year 5. This chart that I have is something that I created to kind of help me remember whenever I go through blocks, to kind of systemize in a sense of the process of what it takes to go from point A to B. If you open up a DAW and you're like, where do I go from here? We're going to be talking about all of the different elements. We're going to be talking about song structure, all those things. So stick around, it's going to be a lengthy video. With that being said, if you can, subscribe to the channel, like the video if you find this helpful. If you don't find this video helpful, totally fine. Any interaction is fine. If you want to dislike the video, freaking dislike the video. I don't care, but do something. I'd appreciate it. Dope. So let's go ahead and hop over to the diagram that I've made, and we are going to start with the very beginning, which is this guy. So whenever we start a beat, the most important thing that we need to kind of figure out is, how are we going to start? If you've ever felt like you've opened up the DAW and you have no idea where to go, these are the 5 strategies that I've come up with. And if you have more, then you can feel free to let me know in the comments. But these are basically just the ways that you can start a concept, the idea of a track, right? So the first thing that's most important is, maybe not most important, but the first thing that I think is like an incredibly underrated skill is audiating. It's a concept that I picked up from my girlfriend, but it's the idea of singing a melody or beatboxing something. You know, if you open up a DAW and you're like, I don't know what I want to do, but maybe I could throw in a beat that's like, I don't know how much of that was caught based off of my noise suppressor, but you know, something like that, then I have an idea. Or if I sing a melody, you know, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm remixing Jurassic Park, go figure. But I have a starting point. I have a reference of where to go and to start building all of the other elements around that. The second is just straight up copying a track. So if you want to, how do I say, take your favorite song, throw it in your DAW, take different elements from it. I don't think that you should try to copy the track exactly, especially if you're a beginner, but maybe there's a melody or a riff or a pattern, something that you can extract from that, and you can recreate it with new sounds, or you can sample it, which we'll talk more about here in a second. That's a really good approach. Third is, maybe you're just going to design something. That's what I do a lot. I'll design drums, or I'll design the things that go into hooks, which we'll talk about here in a second. And I'll just start throwing stuff at the wall and be like, all right, what if I do this? What happens if I do that? And then a lot of times the idea will reveal itself about midway through my sound design stages, you know, or not. Sometimes I don't get out of it and then I give up, but sometimes it's part of it. Fourth, sampling, preset surfing. You know, maybe you're somebody that buys a lot of synths or buys a lot of sample packs, and you're someone that's just wants to be like, oh, I want to find, you know, my favorite snares, my favorite drums, and then you kind of do the same process. And also, like, sometimes it could be a little bit of everything. It doesn't necessarily just have to be a single idea, and I think that's important to stay flexible whenever you're trying to start a track. The fifth is, if you are a musician, then you can jam and record, or you can get friends to come over or do it online, or, you know, sample some people jamming and record all of the ideas that you come up with, both good and bad, and then take little snippets from it to help you start a track. All of these things that I've described are a goal to help you get into the next 2 categories, which is right next to each other: drums and a hook. Let's go ahead and open up with the hook first, because I want to talk about the elements that go into a hook. But I think that the most important thing before we do that is to define what's a hook. It's what the song is about. You know, it's your drop, it's your chorus, it's your, you know, thing that makes the track most memorable. It's like the track identity, I would say, in a lot of cases. The main riff, the main pattern. Let's go with that. What you want to do is find a pattern that you can repeat. And it doesn't have to be the same exact, but it should be something that stays familiar, because one of the major staples of music is repetition. Within that, we've got 5 different things that go into what can help be a hook. It can be drums and stuff as well, but generally speaking, it's one of these things. So let's go ahead and break that down. Texture, that's the easiest one. Strange Foley, or something that could even be somewhat percussive, things that don't necessarily have a tone but have an organic feel to it, or something that is a sound that stands out apart, contrasts from the rest of the other sounds. That's what I would consider to be texture. We have a melody, so if you can sing a melody, boom, you're already there. Chords, self-explanatory, basses, and vocals. These are kind of things that, if you're starting music production, even if you haven't been starting, or even if you don't know anything about music, you probably know what these are. So using all of these, or a combination, or one, or all, gets you into finding a pattern. And for me, in my process, what I do is, after I have a pattern, I duplicate and variate, or I go into resampling. And through that resampling, I can get this other stuff. So maybe I'll record some vocals and resample it through some effects to get some texture. Maybe I will find some melody and resample that, pitch it down, and I'll find a bass. So they kind of interconnect. And that's one of the reasons why resampling and just being able to do audio alchemy and being flexible and whatnot gets into that. Now, you don't have to resample. Like, you could find whatever you need just from this stuff alone, but I want to kind of bridge in where my process comes in as well. And so if it doesn't apply to you, don't worry about it. It's totally fine. But there you go. So after this culmination, rather, of doing all this other stuff, finding texture, melody, chords, one or more of these elements and doing the resampling, that leads me to effects and details. And within that, you find pattern variations. And so once you kind of have this workflow of this, of understanding how you get to finding a hook, you know that it comes from one of these 5 things. Are you going to sample? Are you going to use presets? You know, are you going to play the thing and record it? Are you going to use your voice or someone else's voice? Doesn't matter, but it helps you kind of dwindle down how you're going to get the elements of your track that are not drums into that. And so let's go ahead and hop over into what the drums consist of, which is a lot more simple. Really, when it comes to drums, you've got your fundamentals, which are your kick, snare, clap, and rim, or you have percussion, which could be hats, you know, toms, shakers, whatever. Using these 2 things, or 1 or 2, doesn't matter, right? It doesn't have to have a kick or a snare, but using 1 or both of these elements gets you into a beat/groove. And when we look at the grander scheme of things, a lot of times when we're trying to make a pattern, these 2 go hand in hand with how you figure out how to build a relationship between those elements. This is really important because if you've got a 4/4 beat, but your melody is in 3/4 times, you can definitely make it work if you know what you're doing. But if you're a beginner, you're like, why isn't my thing looping the way that it's supposed to be? Any sounds that you choose to include within your beat or your track needs to have a relationship with everything that's playing either together with it or taking turns. And so the more that you can be intentional with, you know, oh, I'm going to put this hi-hat here because it's accenting this melody or something like that, the easier it is for you to make stuff that feels more compelling and build a world of where the characters can all exist together in a way that makes sense. Now, just as we talked about with the resampling stage, this is also kind of the same thing with the resample and reiterate, because you can resample all this stuff and get a kick, snare, percussion, whatever. If you all have seen my sound design stuff on stream, which by the way, I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then you might have seen me make a percussion generator and I'll pull something that sounds like a kick, pull something that sounds like a snare, apply a bunch of effects to make it blow up, and then I just use that, even though it's not technically a real kick or snare. That's just the way that sound design goes. We can talk more about that another time. Once you have this pattern, right? A combination of kicks, or sorry, a combination of drums and things that make up a hook, then that gets you into the arrangement stage, because really you can just have a single pattern and make that into an entire arrangement. All you need is substitute the pattern that we made as the main section. You can literally loop that for 8 bars or whatever, and then fade it out, fade it in, you're donezo. That's as easy as it has to be. And if you don't believe me, go listen to some beat tapes from Jay Dilla or Madlib, or, you know, people from the old school, right? Because it was just these things on loop. And once you have a loop, you could essentially like call it a day if you wanted to. No, it's not going to be the most compelling track that you've ever made, but just keep that in mind if you ever get stuck. But arrangement doesn't have to be that hard. And really what I want to break this down into are 3 main elements: your intro, your main section, and your outro. Your track, if it's something that's recorded and exported, no matter what, has this, because everything that is a piece of music has a beginning, has a middle, and has an end. We are recording data over time, and that time has a finite duration when we capture that and call it a piece. I know that this was supposed to be beat making like you're 5, but let's just pretend like you're, I don't know, 16 or something. But in any case, even if it's something that fades in and fades out, or even if it's something that is, you know, fart sound, the fart sound begins, it plays, and then it ends, and that's a sample. So like, it's just a matter of scaling. The cool thing about it is that working on each of these elements leads you into the subsections of what these other ones are. So a build and a bridge can kind of be the same thing. These are things that gather energy, right? These are things that are preparing you for what's going to happen next. If you have a main section, you can use it to write a new section. So you can take elements of the main section and create some variants of it, just like how we talked about finding pattern variations. And now instead of just having one main section, this is pattern A. Now you've got pattern B. Well, you don't necessarily have to go main section, 1, main section 2, you might go main section into a bridge, or you might go main section into a break, which I don't have on here, but I didn't really feel like it was necessary because builds and breaks kind of go hand in hand with each other. You can, you know, loop your thing and go from intro to main section back to intro, into a build, into a new main section, into your outro. And so really when it comes into this stuff, you have to have these 3 elements here, but anything after that just becomes like a crossroad of where do I want to go? And if you can get good, again, at building these 3 things, then they will teach you how to build this and teach you how to build this. And I say main section plus because sometimes you have multiple parts. Sometimes you only have one, but you have all these different, you know, patterns that you can vary in between and make more compelling things. So I don't have this down here because this is pretty much the overarching idea about how beat making goes in the first place. However, the difference between, how do you say, like a beginner beat and a professional beat has one major thing in my opinion, and that is nuance. The execution, the moment to moment, the fine details. And I'm not saying that, I don't mean like fine details as a matter of having a bunch of, you know, tracks stacked vertically, you know, oh, my song has 500 tracks, so it's more professional, right? No, actually, usually less is more. That being said, if you have a very intentional relationship between the sounds that you're working with, and you have something that has such a strong groove that is unforgettable, or a melody that's unforgettable, or something of the sort that holds on to you, you know that you have a good piece of music. And it doesn't matter how you get there. It could be through all of these elements that I described, but really when it comes into beat making, we'll just say for the sake of my genre, or anything that has any kind of ancestry to hip hop, we'll say, figuratively, and scale that back to usually jazz or, you know, something like that, then you pretty much have all of these elements within here. You need drums, you need something to go on top of the drums, you make a pattern, and then within that pattern, you can use that to create your other elements. So if you have an intro, you can take those elements to make your main section. If you have a main section, you can use that to make your outro. If you want to start with your outro, then sometimes you can do that, depending on what it is that you're going for. But they all kind of borrow off of each other. It's kind of up to you to kind of work on the songwriting aspect to be like, all right, how do I take what I already have, which is this much, and extend it into this much? And that's why I made such a big deal to include the resampling, because that is one way that, according to my friends Chi, Cage, Zane, pretty much anybody that I've done lessons with in the past, is you're trying to get to a point where the track is starting to write itself. The beat is starting to write itself. Sometimes I interchange track and beat. I try not to use song because songs are meant to be sung, you know. Wait, let me try that again. You know, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. It's a piece of music, and they all kind of have these base structures that this follow. Now, there are a lot of other different kinds of structures of music, believe it or not. Like if you look what the difference between a symphony is, or something of the sort, versus a pop song, you'll see that there is a different structure within these stuff, but they still incorporate the same elements. They still use the same building blocks, the same pillars of which to, you know, have that. Or if you have something that's a halftime beat in my genre versus, you know, a rap beat from trap, you'll notice that it might be, instead of intro, main section 1, main section B, 2, whatever, outro, which is what I usually do, then you might see that you have a intro, hook, or chorus, verse, you know, chorus, bridge, build, verse 3, chorus, outro. That's kind of typical, but you get what I'm saying? So it's just a formula. It's how many of these, how many of those, and how many of those are you going to incorporate? But like I said, if you can just get to this part of getting a main section and really work on your patterning, then you'll be off to the races with whatever beat style / genre you want to make. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to consider my words. And hopefully this was something that kind of helps paint a perspective of how to think about music. Remember that it is an art, and some stuff you have to feel, some stuff you have to unfortunately struggle through, but embrace it and remember to enjoy whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah, thanks so much. If you want to support the channel, you can check out alckemy.com, where I have preset samples and places where you can book lessons, or you can consider becoming a member, where I also have the same master classes and stuff just as a membership instead. My music is also on alckemy.com if you're curious as to what we've been listening to this entire time, or you want to see what other stuff I have to offer. Thanks everybody. I'll catch you in the next one.